From virtual classrooms to social media feeds, are we empowering or endangering our kids? Call us bladesmiths because we're making double-edged swords left and right when it comes to our children's development. Today, we're helping parents move past the PTSD they have from pandemic-required virtual learning and discussing a hot topic. Should we or shouldn't we ban kids from social media? To bring this conversation to life, my guest today is Jessica Shelley. Jessica is a former school teacher and mother of 5 and the co-founder of Dailies. Dailies is an exciting online learning platform that brings unique and personalized learning to children while providing transparency for parents and teachers to track their progress. Dailies serves over 15,000 families worldwide, and this work earned Jessica a spot on Forbes 30 Under 30 list for education. I cannot wait for this conversation, but first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. There are many. Whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, cool, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I don't blame you. I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay, the Lady Engineer. I am a pragmatic futurist and human-first technologist, serial entrepreneur, and innovation consultant. If you're new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's make sense of our children's digital tools and the access they have to them. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so lucky to have you. You might be the third or fourth 30 under 30. I don't know how I slipped into the 30 under 30 crowd, but I got a bunch of you. So let's start with our first segment, Crystal Ball. What does the future hold? This is where I call out interesting predictions that others made for this year. And the experts, my guests, they're working in the trenches, tell us their hot takes. So I'm going to fire off some predictions. And Jessica, I want you to say, yes, I want that to happen, or no, please no. Most likely it's going to be like, yes, that is happening, or no, that is not happening, or just not happening in this time frame. Mm-hmm. So the first is kind of a trend, community-based learning. So we will see more learning projects which create communities to learn something. This includes local micro schools, social network-based studying, community-based, massive online courses, MOOCs, and specialized platforms that help pursue specific subjects together. What do you know?
Yes, that's happening right now. I think that's the future of learning. I think beyond a trend and more, we're seeing that already out in society.
Okay, cool. It is here. All right. The next one, the development of hybrid learning environments in higher education. So the pandemic accelerated adoption of online learning, but 65% of teens still prefer in-person interaction while studying. New ed tech products focus on bringing more people together, including the use of wearable devices that allow students to record notes and interact with peers. Is that a thing?
I think hybrid learning is a thing, and there's definitely a rise in it in the higher education. As far as the wearables on teens and things, I guess I might not know.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that yet.
Yeah, the wearables is the unknown quantity, right? Yeah. I appreciate that. We're allowed to break up these predictions into segments, which fragments, which parts are true and which parts aren't. Yeah, I'm going to have to dive deep more into that. It sounded like things that would help with collaboration. I'm not sure. So the third one.
I just haven't seen it or heard about it enough yet.
Not sure. All right. So increased use of datafication and learning analytics. So a new application for, blockchain, this single source of truth technology, to securely share student records and achievements across institutions, and should streamline the administrative process, ensure the reliability of education credentials.
I'd say we're right there at the budding of that all happening. Yes.
Okay. Cool. What, do you know anything?
I have read a few things, and we've had some ideas around that with Dailies, because we are very focused on learner analytics as well. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you should be in charge of your academic record. It shouldn't be held in a third party thing like a school system. Because if you move, then what happens? Who really owns that data? And it should be kind of back on the individual. So the technology will allow us to, foster that in the future.
I can't help but think Mike Ross from Suits would not survive if there were blockchain for student records, right? Have you watched that show?
My husband has. He's an avid fan, so I've just caught little things here and there. But
Yeah, the whole premise is that he lies about his law school
oh yeah,
education, and many episodes in the first few seasons are trying to figure out where those records lie. So blockchain would foil his entire ruse.
there you go. Good thing it's just fictional TV, right?
So that brings us to our next segment, deep dive. In this segment, we get into the details about a specific technology's implications for everyday people. So today we're talking about virtual learning and the PTSD many parents and kids have from virtual learning during the pandemic. What was your experience?
My experience was that I had just stepped out of the classroom pre-pandemic. I was actually on maternity leave, and so I witnessed what happened as it was kind of happening with my coworkers who were still teachers, my students who were in the classroom with a long-term sub, and kind of like trying to navigate what that was as a teacher and a mother who wasn't actually in the school system at the time. So yeah, I would say I have a whole bunch of different perspectives on what actually happened.
So, on the topic of virtual learning, a friend and parent shared with me that she is scared from COVID. Trying to coax her youngest son through a semester of virtual kindergarten without losing her mind was very difficult, and she's skeptical of virtual learning, especially for like K through 8th grades. What do you say to parents who feel similarly?
I think you have to consider the state of the world and society at that time, because the systems weren't set up to do things intentionally. Things were scrapped together. What can we make work in a matter of 48 hours versus something that has since then been more intentionally designed? There was like online virtual academies and things before the pandemic even hit. And so they had those structures in place where it seemed maybe more seamless. But as far as like the traditional education system, it was definitely not equipped to go so quickly to virtual, while also having that added pressure of trying to meet students where they are, and families are stressed out about the pandemic too. And what does this actually look like? My job is at home. There was so many unknowns that it was overwhelming, I think, for every parent who was trying to not only navigate their child's learning, but also their home life and their livelihood to support their family.
That's a good point, that the trauma might not be just from virtual learning, but from family dynamics, family logistics, environmental factors, all of the above, right?
All of the above, combination of everything. And I would say that the way that things were executed most commonly in the traditional school system was everybody knows that it wasn't ideal. Like even the people in the system, they weren't like, oh yeah, we're so proud of this. It was like, hey, at least we have something that we can do to engage these kids for the rest of the school year.
Yeah, everyone was just trying to adapt. So, for our audience, can you give us a short description of Dailies, maybe a little more than how I introed you? Because it does leverage virtual learning.
Yeah. So we have intentionally designed our virtual learning experience to be high quality small group instruction. And so all of our classes are capped at 8. And then we also do cross curricular lessons. And so, really, what we're talking about is bite sized learning pieces with lots of hands on practice, collaboration, and communication with a certified teacher on the other end that's live. So, nothing is pre recorded. All of the lessons are custom to the kids that are actually signed up for the class. And we do conduct classes on Zoom, but it is much more, I would say, interactive for the teacher, the family, and the student that are participating.
I imagine your teachers are trained on Zoom.
Yes.
And know how to use it. Are you using any of the Zoom apps for the experience at all? I'm just wondering if there's anything above and beyond Zoom for the classes that you're using, that you're creating.
Yeah, so I don't know if necessarily we use Zoom apps, but we do pull in like different resources like Google Suite, Google Slides and stuff is where we do most of our lesson planning and pacing. because we're very intentional with the 55 minutes that we have with our kids. But we do use like the whiteboard feature. We have social breaks for our full homeschool families. So we bring in kind of like a more holistic approach to learning that's more focused on that community driven, trend that you had mentioned at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. So I guess what do you say, or what strategies or techniques have you found effective in kind of helping parents and children kind of get over the hump of virtual learning?
I think it's kind of twofold. So for students, a lot of times we're talking about learning stamina, which is something that is different or positioned differently, like in the traditional model where, kids are sitting in seats. And then we're talking about stamina different. Like I was a kinder through second teacher. So we talked about stamina still in the classroom. But for online learning, the demands for the interaction are higher because your kid can't kind of fall back in their seat of 25 or 30 because the class is so small and it's designed for them. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And so a lot of times it just takes a little bit more routine and building of that learning stamina to be able to carry on the conversation and the lesson throughout, depending on the child's age. And then as far as the parents, we do a lot of like coaching around, making sure that our anxieties as parents doesn't bleed over to our kids and that they can experience, this kind of schooling for themselves, because we've never lived through that from a kid's perspective. And so then we also are very open about what their children are learning in the classes, the goals for the next session, making sure that they feel confident in the services and the support that their child's receiving to kind of help mitigate some of those anxieties too.
Yeah. Have you encountered any common misconceptions or stigmas surrounding virtual learning?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, especially after the pandemic, it was, well, my child wasn't seen in their Zoom classroom. So why do you even care about my child in class? And, we follow up after saying like, hey, we missed so-and-so in class today. Like it's very much more personalized. But that was very contrary to the, experience that they had in the traditional system. Another thing is, often what we get is like, oh, well, how do you know what my child is supposed to be learning or where they're at? And it's like, well, we have certified teachers. I'm pretty sure we can figure out, what your child is needing and then also help move them forward. And I think that's also contrarian to like what historically online learning has been with, high school or college tutors or, asynchronous courses. Our method is a little bit different than the historic methods of online learning.
Got it. So what lessons did you learn from the early pandemic to design Dailies?
Yes. Oh, I love this question because I have my master's degree in curriculum and instruction, and I got to really nerd out on all the teaching stuff based on what we learned from
Cool, do it. Let's nerd out.
Yeah. So really it came down to kind of three things: was class size. We realized these Zoom rooms of 30 plus kids where there's no teacher interaction was really not ideal for anyone. The teacher wasn't able to understand where their child is, so we intentionally designed ours to be capped at 8. Our average class size is 4 to 6. As far as the lesson structure, not having office hours where it's just like, oh, come pop in and talk to a teacher. We have a very structured like micro schedule within the 55-minute sessions that we have. So we're able to intentionally meet reading, writing, and math objectives every single day versus, coming for an hour-long math block that was required for, meeting the instructional minutes. And then I think the third piece really is the parental engagement that we kind of expect baseline on our platform, is that you're checking in on your kids and you're reading the session reports from the teacher and you're uplifting your child around that progress and success. And if you need help with that, let us know and we'll be more than happy to, extend additional resources.
Cool. So what is the role of the parent? It sounds like they're definitely not just dropping their kids off.
Right. Yeah. So I guess they technically could, but I feel like we bombard them maybe with enough communication for them to ask questions and to ask for help too if there's something that doesn't make sense. I would say we intentionally also try to meet parents where they are. So if there's some things that they're like, I have honestly no clue, I need you guys to help my child with this, then we will take it on and we'll still update them on progress. Whereas other parents are like, hey, my child got this progress report back and we need resources for XYZ, or we need a session specifically on this skill. And then we cater to that too.
And you guys provide these reports. Is it built into your system?
It is, yes.
Very cool. I also read that the times might be different, like the timing of the classes, and you offer kind of supplemental education as well as full for homeschool. So what's the supplemental education and who is the intended audience for that?
Yeah, so supplemental, I mean, we offer classes 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in all US time zones. And so whether that's before school, during school, if they have like a study session, or after school, we can meet families there. For supplemental, most of our customers are families that are looking to help their child accelerate. So maybe they're advanced in math and, you know, the traditional system is like, oh no, you're in second grade. You can't go any further than this until next year. And so what we do is we help customize lessons to help accelerate them through content that they're inspired about and interested in. And then on the flip side of that is we get the families that are like, you know, my child is in third grade and they're really struggling with phonics and early reading skills. And so what we do is help bring them back up to grade level and then help them maintain and sustain that progress moving forward.
I remember one of the predictions for 2023 was high dosage tutoring to help kids catch up. My friend who said it was hard with a kindergartner, she said she learned from teachers maybe that it was the worst for first graders because that's where they really learn how to read. And if they were doing it all virtual, they really fell behind. Is that true? Can you tell us more?
First grade is definitely the year where it's like make it or break it for reading, because as you move into second grade, I taught kinder through second, so I taught all of those. But as you move into second grade, it becomes much more about focusing on the comprehension skills and then just fixing any of those kind of early reading errors from first grade. I would say if your child was in first grade during the pandemic, yeah, likely they got hit really hard because it's really hard to do quality like phonics and reading instruction in a group of 30 plus kids when you have to really hear how they're decoding different words.
That is so fascinating. So who else does virtual learning work for? Are you reaching like rural areas? Who's coming to Dailies?
Yeah, rural areas where there's maybe not access to high quality tutors or early learning programs. Also, preschool is a big part of our user base as well, where there's not as many preschools in areas, and so they're looking for creative ways to engage their kids, or maybe they
Wow, preschoolers sitting on the computer, really?
I mean, our classes are short and engaging, and so we do start at age 3, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of our our preschool classes. I'll speak to that for a second because I want to defend a little bit too of the screen time at the early age, but our pre-K classes are designed to be hands-on and environmentally focused. And so they're doing things on paper and with coloring tools and finding things around their house that are shapes and colors and stuff. So it's not like they're just sitting across the
yeah. I can't imagine it. So
yes.
I think I read about 3 million children are homeschooled in the US. So you also do you offer the full program virtual? Or so tell me more about that.
Yeah, so for our homeschoolers, what we do is we combine some different types of classes. So we have our academic classes, they have weekly enrichment classes, we do small group tutoring sessions, which we call study halls, and then they have a daily social break. And so what we do is we outline the curriculum for them for the entire year. And then they meet with us every day, Monday through Friday. And then we tailor those lessons based off of the group of students. And they have like their same little cohort throughout the whole year. So they get to know each other really well. And then we provide those reports and like the homeschool law and regulation support and all of that too for the families.
Are there any stories of the kids meeting each other from like studying with each other from across the country? Do you know?
there has been some pen pal relationships developed, and then my own son, he's actually been in the program since he was in kindergarten, and he's like, I can't wait to go see my friend in Pennsylvania. And so we're like planning a trip to PA and to Florida where his other classmate is. And it's really sweet to see how like the relationships have blossomed, and they talk about their friends even outside the class. So
Yeah. And up to what grade do you do dailies?
we go up through 6th grade.
Oh, okay. I
Mhm.
was gonna say, I was gonna ask if science class could really translate. I'm sure some of science class, but
Yeah.
chemistry would be a hard one, I think.
Yeah. Our science classes are more focused on like the inquiry based model, and so they'll do like science projects and then report back, and we kind of coach them through that process versus it being like live experiments where we're mixing things together on camera.
Yeah. Are there other specific subjects that are just better for virtual, or like not necessarily that virtual is better for it, but I guess better than other subjects?
That's a great question. I would say that there's maybe subjects that are better in person versus virtual, which would be more of like the physical activity, like the sports classes is something that parents often ask about, and so we hook them into like their local district and their local community sports. But that's hard to have a team sport or prepping online. Another one is like one-on-one music lessons. Like if your child really wants to, learn how to do piano, it's harder to do that in a class structure. You need to have like a one-on-one session.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool. Well, that's really awesome. I'm hoping any parents that are still suffering from some trauma from virtual learning can see that there's opportunities for their children, whether it's tutoring or excelling. I like, what do you call it? High achievers.
Acceleration.
Yeah, I would have been dumped in the math class for sure. Actually, I want to be dumped in the math class. Like, I enjoy
I love it.
advanced math.
Oh my god.
Any other parting words for those parents before you move to the next segment?
I would just want to say too, like, feel free to reach out if there's anything, like any questions. We're very friendly. Like we're real teachers. We're real parents. I have 5 kids, like you mentioned. So, I mean, if you ever just need some advice or a shoulder to lean on, we've all lived it too, and we can provide some guidance whether you work with us or not. So
Cool, cool. All right, so our third segment, from disruptive to disastrous. In this segment, my guest and I talk about when a technology backfires and has unintended consequences. So today we're gonna cover the case for banning children from social media. So before we jump in, for Make Sense listeners, we're continuing the conversation from a previous episode with Chief Medical Officer Dr. Brian Wallace, so I'll link to that as well. 1 in 4 American children is estimated to have a mental health issue. And right now, popular discussion and legislative efforts are focused on one cause: social media. Can you give us, like, what's your take on this? Your broad take, and then we'll get into some details.
sure. Broad take, I would say, mostly comes from the parenting perspective of, yes, social media without guardrails is very detrimental. I think even for adults. I mean, we already have that kind of addictive pattern too with different social media platforms, and so then putting that into the hands of a child who may be like 8 to 13 or even adolescents is a little scary because they don't necessarily have the skills and the tools to be able to understand what's real and what's maybe not real of what they're um, indulging in online.
It occurred to me that we do not teach social media etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at like parents that bring their kids to dinner, you teach your kid how to use a fork, a spoon, a knife, what the cultural expectations are when you're sitting at the table. There's really no handbook on social media for children, for parents to kind of impart the similar to wait for the green light before you cross the street type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen anything for kids, like for to help support parents in this?
I don't think so. I think it's been more of like, you know, our generation that is now raising kids in this kind of digital age, it's new to us too. Like it was something that came about when we were in our adolescent years. And so understanding the implications of even what we post on our children is something that I think kind of goes over heads.
Yeah.
Understanding the true gravity of what's actually out there.
Do you think social media is the cause of the mental health epidemic in children?
I think there's two parts of that. I think, yes, for children that have access to social media or it's something that their parents are talking about a lot. I mean, you see these rise of family influencers where their children are part of like every single video. And then I think on the other side of that is the parents' mental health, and because of the way that they use social media and how that impacts how they're raising their children or their perspectives or even their just engagement with their family overall.
Mm-hmm. So experts have there's a lot of things that have given rise to this mental health epidemic in children. The pandemic, we talked about that. Family dynamics, particularly instability, social isolation, external events, and actually a lack of independent skills. So we don't let our kids spend as much time outside on their own, walk places on their own. They have very limited access to independent activities, whereas they have unlimited access to the internet.
That's interesting perspective. And I agree, because we think a lot about, I think parenting is physical safety, like keeping my child alive. Mm-hmm. And then second to that is, wow, you let them kind of run free on these things that mentally are not safe for them. And that have even, less restrictive boundaries. Like if you see a kid that's about to cross the street and you're a stranger, most likely you're going to stop and be like, hey, let me cross with you or something.
Yeah.
Whereas on the internet, it's like strangers just welcome the kids in.
Yeah. So. You can't perceive it because it's all in the virtual world. So as a mother of 5, how old is your oldest?
He just turned 8.
Okay. How are you thinking about social media for him?
No.
No.
We have his laptop, tightened down. Things are blocked. No, there's no way we're taking any chances.
And what age do you think kids should get like a phone?
I think if there's a need where the child is away from a parent or guardian or caregiver, where there would be a physical security risk, than a phone. But I don't see any need for a smartphone for kids. Like if you can call your mom or text your mom, then that's all you really need.
Right. So I think, one person I asked about this said they, I think like 10, 12-year-olds are now getting phones, and they're just like our iPhones and, Android devices. They're not, why isn't there like a Toys R Us meets iPhone collaboration for something more restricted for kids? Would that make parents feel better about it?
I think there is phones out there in the market where you can like program 4 numbers into a phone, and like there's no screen, you just click a button and it'll make a call.
Oh, okay.
But I would see too, like the pressure from the child, if they're 10 or 12 years old, it's not cool to have a phone like that. Like that's like a baby phone, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe some of the pressure is coming from the child wanting to fit in or, act more mature than their age. And then the parent is also like, well, I see that they need a phone and I don't really need to fight this battle. Right?
Yeah, right.
So
they're keeping up with the Joneses. It affects all of us, right? And then I think what happens is once you give the oldest kid a phone, the younger kids are going to want it sooner than that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my son, he's been on baseball for the last 4 years. And I think 2 years ago, he was like caught like playing video games on a phone in the dugout or something when he was supposed to be out on the field. And I was like, where'd you even get this? He's like, oh, my friend just brought his phone to baseball practice. And I was like, what? You're 7.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's resources out there. I think it's part of like society's culture though, that is kind of normalized, giving access to smartphones and internet and all of that.
I mean, when we talk about a potential social media ban, we're not talking about banning access to the entire internet. We're talking about specific social media sites. So I have a question for you. Which app do you use the most?
I use LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay, this question's not as fun with LinkedIn, but I'll ask you, this is a thought experiment I started back in 2000. If social media apps had a Surgeon General's warning on them, just like cigarettes do,
Ooh,
what would LinkedIn's say?
such a good one. I want to say it would be something along the lines of dishonest information, or to like make sure that you vet it, like don't take things for face value.
Yeah, or comparing achievements, like warning, the achievements you see in this app.
Yes, yes, for sure. Or like credentials. I mean, I've been like, people have gotten my personal information from LinkedIn and like spoofed people that I've like written recommendations for too, like asking for money and like texting my personal phone. And I'm
Wow.
like, so that there's like a whole nother side of LinkedIn that is very like predatory because of how much information is posted about, who you know and how you know them, where I could definitely see that being a needed warning as well.
Yeah. Surgeon General warning. You may see someone celebrating a new position. Don't give up hope on your job search.
Yes. Yes. For
Consult
sure.
a career coach before using this app.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it.
So, do you think that government should ban social media for kids? Like, is that a thing that
I
they
think
should
that
do?
I think it's a fine line. I would say no, that you shouldn't ban it for kids, but I think that there needs to be more appropriate like resources provided to families and children about how to use it safely if they're going to use it.
Yeah, I think I was listening to someone else break it up. The three solutions are, you know, change parenting, give parents better tools, trust the technology companies to, restrict by age, but they haven't been doing that. For anyone in the US, COPPA, COPPA, is a law from 1998 that has not been updated at all, but it restricts anyone younger than 13 years old from creating an account on any site. But right now, if you're go create an account on Facebook, you just have to check a box that says you're older than 13. So there's really no enforcement of that. But could they be held to a higher standard? Maybe. And then there's instituting some government regulation. I know you mentioned that you were working on some cybersecurity. Do you know anything about the implications of government regulation or age verification or anything like that?
I don't. I know it more from like this school implementation piece of like data sharing between like LMSs and ed tech providers.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say like we do have some legislation, right? We have COPA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so maybe not necessarily getting rid of everything, but just defining, now that we have more robust internet systems and advancing technology, of what that actually should be protecting is a good baseline to start with. Is
Yeah.
updating what we already have, and then enforcement or whatever comes
I
next.
think before we get into the nitty gritty of solutions or how we could verify age, I noticed you were like absolutely no. But are there pros to social media that kids could benefit from?
I think that there's opportunities for learning through social media in ways that extend beyond like the traditional classroom or the textbook. I think that social media is also a really great place for kids to be in community with other kids, as long as there are guardrails and there's, parental or adult supervision that's trusted. I think there's also implications for, if you ban children from social media, you lose the opportunity to teach them how to use it responsibly as they age and approach adolescence and adulthood, where those are going to be opportunities that are there anyway. And if you can't teach them how to use it safely, then how are they going to navigate that on their own? And so that's where I think my stark no came from, is like you lose out on the opportunity to teach your children how to use that tool that they're going to use eventually in the future.
Right, right. So I believe, is it Texas that's considering banning social media for kids under 18? I heard that it actually is like the precedent in the Supreme Court is actually like you cannot do that. There's a like you're restricting children's civil liberties. Kids do have First Amendment rights too. So doing an outright ban, trying to say just like alcohol, social media is nothing, you can't touch it until you're 21 is just like one, it's not going to work. And like two, it actually violates the Constitution, which I think is an interesting take.
Well, yeah, and I think too, if we're in that mindset of banning anything that could cause harm when not used appropriately, like look at our grocery stores.
Yeah.
What are we doing then? Because anything should be used, like you use it in moderation, you use it responsibly, and then it doesn't cause as much if there is harm. And I think like the way that we're in with the parenting aspect of social media right now is we don't know, because this is really the first generation of children that are being parented by people that have been on social media for most of their lives. And so we're kind of just getting into even understanding what the true effects are generationally even.
Right. So do you have any opinions specifically on the TikTok debate?
Could you maybe refresh on the TikTok? What is happening there? Things, but maybe I want to understand it.
I know you're a mom of 5. I like okay. General complaints about TikTok. One, it's owned by a Chinese company. American data makes its way to data servers outside of the US, possibly in China, where that data could be used to cause harm. So there's the one issue is like, if TikTok wants to operate in the US, they need to sell their US operations to an American company. I don't even know how that would work. Like you'd have to bifurcate, like split up the code base. It's like it's a mess. So that's one thing. Then there's the Utah's like using COPA, the restricting the rule regulation I described before about 13 and younger, to go after TikTok. Actually, 48 attorney generals are suing TikTok because, and I will link to another episode where we talked about this, but the way TikTok operates in China is very different than the way it operates in the rest of the world. So parental controls are automatically turned on for kids so that they can only spend an hour on TikTok every day. So parents in the US would have to set it as an app limit or have to go find the parental controls inside the app, which they probably don't even know exist. Mm-hmm. On top of that, they did a study interviewing kids that had been on TikTok in China and what their career aspirations were. And they said stuff like astronaut, engineer. And they interviewed kids in America, and it was like influencer, right? And the actual content that TikTok chooses to show its Chinese users is actually very, very different than the content it chooses to show, not just in the US, but other countries, meaning that they could be manipulating the algorithm to promote certain types of content that cause mental health issues or political unrest or anti-US sentiment.
Wow. I hadn't heard about all the second part. I had heard about the first, and to that first part about the data sharing would be that they have information already. Like anything that you post online is shared with whoever, who knows. But I think that is very interesting, and definitely to be concerned about the second part where they can be manipulating the content that you see and what your children are seeing. And that the algorithm isn't universal across, every country.
Yeah, I think that's the part where when people are upset about and talking about a TikTok ban, It's interesting that I can be dismissive of the data privacy issues. Like the data is already out there. In another episode and other episodes, I generally talk about companies have a lot of data. Do they know anything from it? Is a different story anyway. But it is the algorithm manipulation that concerns me the most. I try to think about the accusations against Facebook and Twitter, the misinformation, the election problems. I feel like that was bad actors taking advantage of the algorithm and the company not responding appropriately. But with TikTok, it's not bad actors taking advantage of the algorithm and the company not responding. It's the company taking advantage of the algorithm and then denying anything from it. So
seems
could
much more intentional versus like, oh, I'm going to turn a cheek.
Yeah.
You know, like this is potentially intended to cause harm or unrest, in a international market.
So here's a question. I know YouTube has filtering controls for parents and YouTube for kids, and even every single video I upload for Make Sense, I have to check, is this appropriate for kids or not? Do you have any experience with that for your children, and does it work well?
I have experience because that they only had YouTube Kids, and then realized that things were getting through YouTube Kids that shouldn't have been. And so they were blocked from YouTube on all devices. And now it's something that is controlled more as if we're watching videos as a family and we've, pre-watched the video or know that it's a safe video.
What kind of stuff came through? I'm curious.
Yeah, so a lot of the character type stuff. So they would be watching Peppa Pig videos, and then there would be murder graphics type stuff, or
seriously,
there's voiceover too, where it looks like it's a normal video on the thumbnail, and then you click into it and it seems good, and then you can hear there was one video that I walked behind my son and I was like, what are you watching? Because it was an adult voice, and it was a voiceover over the cartoon images that was saying things that were not the actual characters in the show talking.
Wow.
So it looked like the child's show. And as a parent, I would have been like, oh yeah, they're just watching Peppa Pig if I would have saw it. But unless I heard it, yeah. So we blocked it all.
So your kid could have headphones on.
Yep.
And you wouldn't know because the graphics look like a kid's show.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. And there's some that do that, they'll cut. So it's they'll start the cartoon and it seems normal for the first 10 minutes or so. And then you get to minute 18 and then it's some paint sort of animation or whatever, where it's it clearly doesn't match the same animation style, but something is being acted out that is not what the episode was about.
Wow. So YouTube has this basic infrastructure to try to do YouTube for kids, and it is not working that well. So that doesn't really make us feel very confident about the ability of other social platforms to put guardrails in place. Okay. I think it's about time that kids have platforms that were designed from scratch with guardrails, and the term I've heard is safe socialization built into it from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to share with you and share with the audience is that the most popular solution to this right now is age verification, but that requires sharing personal identifying information, which creates an additional cybersecurity and personal security problems, because we're giving even more data linking a parent to a kid and providing IDs for verifying age and putting that all in the hand of private technology companies. So
that sounds very scary.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that idea of the leading solution being that
age
verification.
So let's end on a positive note though. Like I just lost my train of thought, which tells you where we went with that. I suppose like actually where I wanted to go with that is if we were to create, social media etiquette 101, like a parent's guide to training their kids for social media, like do you have ideas of what would go on there?
Yeah, I think everything from profile creation to like discussion prompts that you have with your kids and video tutorials would be helpful because parents might not even know how to like set proper parameters.
Yeah. I'm thinking even things like how to politely ask your friend to untag you in a photo or take a photo down that you don't want of yourself. Learning like these are the type of photos you do not want online. Proper use of like emojis or like how to exit like a battle, a fight in comments. I mean, parents could use this stuff too, like adults could use this stuff too, but it seems like we need some like social media etiquette book for kids and for parents too. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah. All right, so we'll wrap up here. So thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tavis, and guest, Jessica Shelley. We hope you enjoyed our take on virtual learning and social media for kids or not. Jessica, where can people find you online?
LinkedIn is great, and then also at dailiespods.com.
Dailiespods.
Yep.
.com. And you have like a free offer for parents that want to try this out. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so if you're interested in trying out a class with your children, feel free to navigate to our website and create a free account. You'll be matched with some teachers, and then we'll be able to give you some feedback about, your child's current levels and then ideas to kind of help propel them forward.
That's awesome. So, as always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes, including a list of the top 10 clips from the first 30 episodes. Dive into the most insightful clips without having to watch full episodes. I want to save you some time and I want you to get an idea of what Makes Sense is all about. Visit lindsayt.com/ms-top 10. So, final note, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits on YouTube. Hit that subscribe for next week's episode. Follow wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you, Jessica, for joining me.
Thank you so much.